Evidence for evolution backfires again. With this paper, same data, different analysts, variation in effect sizes due to analytical decisions in ecology and evolutionary biology. Now, this paper was given to me by someone who goes by the name Frosted on YouTube as one of 10 papers that he's supplying to me as evidence for evolution. Now, it has become clear to me as I'm looking at these 10 papers that Frosted has supplied that all he did was do a Google search on titles that have evolution in them, okay? Because so he put zero effort into this, and that's becoming obvious. So, Frosted, I hope that this is a good lesson to you that just because a paper has evolution in the title does not mean that it's going to supply evidence for evolution. And this paper is a perfect example. So, what this paper is actually showing is that in evolutionary biology, when people are given data, they can be given the same data and come up with completely different results depending on how they choose to analyze the data. So for this paper, the researchers chose 173 teams. Okay, so they got 173 teams of people to analyze data. And they did this for two different sets of data. So they did it on evolutionary influences of like how many birds are in a nest. Okay, and then evolutionary also this is more not so much an evolutionary one, but the basically the effects of grass on eucalyptus seedlings. So that was more related to the ecology one here that you see. So what's interesting is that they gave the same data. The data had already been collected. They gave the same data to 173 different teams. And they said, analyze this data and tell us whether there's a negative or a positive correlation with, the different bird situations and with the different levels of grass cover for the eucalyptus trees. And what was startling, even though not really surprising, is that the teams came up with very different results. And so some teams had negative correlations, some team had positive. And so the data was just all over the place. And so, the conclusion that these researchers made is that basically we need to be careful about using one analyst, one paper, the way that they analyze data and drawing conclusions about, any situation that we're analyzing. And, another thing that they did in the study was they subjected these teams' work to different peer reviewers. And what was interesting about their results is that even the peer reviews did not agree with each other. So the peer reviewers had to say like whether these results were like ready to be published, needed a few alterations, needed a lot of alterations, or totally not ready, like need to be thrown out or, completely redone. And the peer reviewers didn't even have the same reactions. So that their data was all over the place as well. And so another thing that they tested was how did the team's level of expertise factor into how their analyses came out? Like, did the teams that had more experienced people come up with similar results? Was this like lack of experience in some teams that were causing the data to be so wildly different? And what they found is that there was no correlation between the amount of expertise on the team and their analysis to how their results came out. So this just gives us a lot of caution. We need to be recognizing that you can't believe everything you read when it comes to analyzing data and coming to a conclusion. And so I thank you, Frosted. This was a very enlightening paper. It does not supply evidence for evolution, and it shows us some of the problems when it comes to analyzing these evolutionary scenarios. But thanks for trying, and let's see if any of Frosted's papers that he's given me will supply any evidence for evolution. So join me next time. And so if anybody wants to, after I'm done with the Frosted challenge, supply me with 10 papers that will show evidence for evolution, I would be glad to take up the challenge with someone who's actually willing to put in the work and pick papers that do demonstrate evidence for evolution. Now, I told Frosted that the reason we started this is he asked me how many papers would it take to convince me that evolution is true. Now, I said 10. Now, I don't know if 10 papers would be enough to persuade me, but if there are 10 papers demonstrating good evidence for evolution, that might help me on the road. So, I invite someone who's willing to put in the work to supply me with the evidence that you see for evolution. Thanks for watching.